This is the federalism unit. Now, question 3 on the exam. And to explain changes in the federalism, like throughout American history, is it started off really like small and more like separated from everyone. It was dual. It was the dual federalism, which is like the two separate. It's like there's the state government and there's the federal government, and they kind of like had their own powers implied to each other, and they really like didn't like meddle with each other until like unless there was like conflict that they felt like they were right or one person was right on, and then there was as it changed, it became more like involved. The federal government became more involved in like cooperative federalism when they started taking care of like the people's welfare and like money and like how like like the economy basically, and then the states felt like I guess they were kind of weakened at that point a little bit, and how they felt a bit underpowered. And then the next one would be that it kind of changed throughout time, just like it changes as like the ideology of everyone as history changed. Like it went from trying to do it by themselves to like a more like unified government, in the sense that it went dual cooperative creative, and then the new, and it just changes. It changed throughout time to fit what needed to be fit in each time period. And dual federalism is just it's basically an agreement divided between the federal and state governments, and it's basically the state government was able to exercise the power without interference. Well, according to them, the state governments were able to exercise their power according to like them and the Constitution, without interference for the federal government. And how that kind of worked, it was like they were both separated into their own like jurisdictions, I guess, and like the federal government had the ability to regulate commerce between state and international trade. They were able to declare war. They had more powers than the state, or like more like implied stuff to them. They were able to establish an army and establish like post offices and stuff, and like issue postage. And then the state powers were able to like regulate interstate commerce, conduct elections and ratify amendments. But that was more like, to them, it was more like their state was like that. Their powers were basically limited to like their states, not like a big grand scheme of things. They kind of just stayed there. So it was kind of like the state governments were a little beneath the federal government in that regard. But then when the Great Depression led to the Great Depression led to the people like needing some change, and they realized that the dual federalism wasn't working, and they needed to like come together and really like set a new plan for this. And that's when the government started to take more role in the economy, and it was like the first time he had done that. And they started making agencies, and they really just like changed the outlook of like government, that it should be this thing that stays away from like money and like the economy, and it made it to a system where people started to rely on the government for money, and people started to think that the government would be there to help them out if they were got into like a tough spot. It led to it just basically killed the mentality that government and the people should be separated entirely, and that the government should be there for the people. And the relationship is more now, it's new federalism, and it's geared more towards like the states more than the government. It's kind of like Ronald Reagan cut back on like how big the government was, and like it changed the power more towards the states, so they had a bit more power to and basically he was able to just separate that what the states could do and not could do. Like he basically like took out the restrictions that he felt were blocking and impeding the growth of states, and he was able to make it so the states had a bit more power. Not a bit more power. It made it more balanced in between the both of them. Mainly because the government didn't have this huge like vice grip on the Senate. The states, and they could really help their own states grow and mature into it while not exceeding the power of the federal government. And I think really the national government kind of has more of a pull than like the state governments, mainly because it's like they're like the main like thing. They can like rule something unconstitutional. They can they're like the end of the line, and they can basically like kind of regulate like what the states can do, in a sense, as if like they are really just kind of like in control of it in a way. Like they have more expressed and implied powers, and like they have like they're able to really control them more and say that their law is like the final law. If it like kind of imposes on, like, if states make laws that kind of impose on like the Constitution, they can be like, no, that's not right. And it really just kind of whittles down to like what they find, like they like get from the Constitution, that they can really like take control of what they really like want to do, I guess, if that makes sense. I'm sorry. And really, it just kind of that's it.